talk about that later on.
Oh.
You have got a fan base here, then.
The hype train has left the station.
How old did you say this was?
12 years.
12 years, yeah.
Man, it is good. We just threw all of that on the floor, and this man has no regard for safety. He is not wearing shoes. He could go down while using it.
And John's dead. Wow. That didn't take long at all, but I'm sure he'll come back. Man, that last soundbite always gets me, John. How are you, man?
Good, how you doing, brother?
Good. It's good to see you guys. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, so it is time for Weekly Whiskey here on Weekly Whiskey. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. We have a great guest tonight. Before we get to him, we have a little bit of news to cover. It has been a fucking insane week for our bourbon barrel picks. We have, oh man, let's see. The Smooth Ambler started going out today. Super excited about that. You guys will be getting your bottles. Russell's bottles are landing to folks. So fruit stand and dessert power are hitting people as we speak. Last week's Knob Creek Course Marshal No went out as well. All of those bottles have landed, I believe, and the New Riff hit as well. So that is 4 barrels in the span of 10 days. It is insanity. We are bringing you more of the Elijah Craig. I'm announcing it now. Will be for sale in the next 2 weeks. That is an 8-year, 6-month barrel. It is awesome, as well as a 15.5-year Alberta Rye Whistle Pig. So that's the most news that I think we've had in a long time. Like, that is packed.
That's a lot of barrels, man.
And we are going crazy. 2021 is going to be no different. We're doubling it. It is barrel out the wazoo. We got Jack Daniels. We got Knob Creek. We got all sorts of fun stuff coming up.
So many knobs, so many jacks, all in one place.
So many innuendos that we are just skipping right on by. But go ahead. If you guys are in the chat, let us know what you are drinking. We've poured some great whiskey here. And we have a guest that I'm super excited about. This is pretty novel. We've heard about whiskey on boats. We've heard about whiskey in warehouses. But we've found a new place that people are throwing whiskey. So I think without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Hank Ingram from Ingram Whiskey. Hank, how are you now?
Doing all right. Good to be on, guys.
Good. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see a guest. Finally, someone picked up on the suit call as well. It's always good to see a classic.
Marvelous. Here. Love to tune up with you guys.
Well, I have a similar hat, but it's at the cleaners, I think. So maybe when we have the bourbon come out, we'll do another. I'll wear the hat.
There we go.
Perfect.
That's
a
deal. John's been trying to get me one of those hats for a long time, so maybe I'll bend under pressure as well and join you too.
Absolutely, man. I've been pushing these on Jay and telling him that he needs to get on board with it, but we'll get there eventually. You don't want to cover up all that beautiful hair he's got.
I know it's. I got a whole lot of it. It grows real fast. But anyways, we're not here to talk about my hair. Let's go ahead and talk about some whiskey. So Hank, you're here with Ingram Whiskey. I'm really curious. How did you get started in the whiskey industry? And then let's move on in. I'm super curious to hear about what led you guys to decide to age your barrels where you decided to age them, because you guys have quite a story.
Yeah, well, thanks for that lead in, Jay. So I would say they're actually kind of one and the same. So I'll just kind of combine both questions if it's all right with you. So the way I got into aging our rye that you have right there, the way that we are doing so is my family's been around the river for a very long time, and I've known a lot about the river industry, and I didn't know as much about bourbon. Kind of backstory on me, kind of grew up with stories of my great grandfather. He was this lumberjack in kind of the western or north Midwest area, and back then they would cut these big trees down and they'd send them down the river to the sawmills. And what do you need to make whiskey? You need barrels. Well, I like to think that maybe some of the lumber that he was cutting back then wasn't all used for just floorboard. I bet some of it was used for the early barrels of the day. And so he really kind of got our family's story started. And then you fast forward 2 generations to my great-grandfather, who was also, so I'm O.H. Ingram III. My great-grandfather was O.H. Ingram, and the lumberjack was O.H. Ingram. So we've been real creative in our naming of our children. I don't have any kids, but I'll tell you, one of them's doomed. So I don't know what the female equivalent of Oren is, but that's what the O stands for, is Oren. So anyways, my great grandfather, he gets us into the barge business he was in a different business that required barges. It was actually moving oil, and then got into Ingram Barge Company. It really started in the 40s, and so I come from this generation or this family that's had generations of business on the rivers, and so I always thought I was going to be doing business on the river, and this is just a different iteration of it. But I was in business school and was training to be in finance and accounting in the family business. I'm invited to a bourbon tasting one evening put on by the local distributor here in Nashville, and I go in and they start talking about what it takes to make bourbon. And as you know, it's kind of the things that everybody knows. Bourbon is majority corn. It's made in the United States, 2 years. It's straight, 4 years, no age statement, new char barrels. And then they start talking about the history of bourbon. And back in the early days, all these really the rough and tumble folks were running from the law, the tax man. And so they went to the frontier, which was Kentucky. And Kentucky was right on the river. And so you had this great interstate system that was provided by nature. And so what did these guys do? They were entrepreneurs. One, they picked up, they ran away and settled the frontier. They're distilling their corn that they can't eat. That's the excess, and they're putting it in these barrels. And a couple of them decided to send it down the river to New Orleans. And so, I'm like, well, we send stuff down the river to New Orleans all the time. Let's do it with whiskey. And that was the genesis of the idea. Now, from idea to actual operation, that's a whole different story. And there's a great tale of red tape and bureaucracy overcome, and here we are. So really, it was having this kind of genetic knowledge of the river, being around it for a long time, and then finding out that something else that I happen to have a passion for had an integral tie into the river. And so, well, let's put the river back in the whiskey, and here we are.
Man, that's pretty cool. We're tasting the rye whiskey here tonight, which I believe is no age statement, but bottled at 40
3 years. It's 3 years. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Sorry. Apparently I can't read. So, you're talking about the river and the whiskey. So as far as I understand, the barrels are actually matured on the river. That's correct, right?
That's right. And actually on the back of our label, we have a map that shows whereabouts we are. So we're in Ballard County, Kentucky.
Okay.
And right across from Cairo, Illinois, it's where the Ohio River and the Mississippi River come together to make what we know as the mighty Mississippi. And we chose this location because it's got two rivers coming together. And so you're always going to have some significant variation in height of the river, because big rainstorm in Cincinnati, drought up in the Midwest, all of those have factors. And, on our website, we actually have a live tracker, so you can go on there and see what the river's doing. Okay. And we track the cumulative movement of the barge going up and down with these barrels inside of it. But not only that, it's the inter-day movement. It's not violent rocking. It's years spent on there, exposed to this just constant slight motion that really causes that whiskey to keep churning and change the way that it interacts with the barrel, different than you would get in a traditional setting, just landlocked.
That's really interesting. I'm super fascinated because, prior, we everybody knows of Jefferson's, right? Like they put barrels on boats and they kind of zigzag across the ocean, and I think that's very different than the barge setup. But so I'm super curious here. I'm an engineer by trade. Did you guys, barges obviously haven't, as far as I'm aware, carried barrels historically, right? So I imagine some pretty heavy work went into turning a barge into a rick house. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, traditionally, the shipping container of the early days were barrels, and so now obviously we have these steel boxes that are capable of holding many tons. They're stackable. Barrels really had a lot of that similar functionality back in the day. George Washington, and one of his early addresses as president, actually said, I foresee a country crisscrossed by a nation of canals. So, barging in the early pioneers of bourbon, they were very familiar with it. I think it's funny now, towboaters and deckhands and all of us in the industry, we have some very corny jokes, and every once in a while somebody will say, well, man, do people like live out on the barge for a couple days? How long does that work? And I said, well, they don't live on the barge, they live on the boat that's pushing the barges. But yeah, I know it's not great, but hey, we have our fun. So your question about the rick house. So it's actually a fairly simple design. I was looking at making this beautiful show pony with some handcrafted carvings, and really all we need is something that will hold the barrel from knocking into the next thing, tipping over, and really causing a scene. So it was harder to convince the powers that be that this was a viable opportunity for aging spirits than it was to necessarily build out. So there's in the law, the regulations, an experimental path to getting your DSP, your distilled spirits permit, and that was the path that we chose. So we, because it's actually illegal to warehouse spirits on a vessel.
I was wondering about that. That's why I'm so curious. Like I didn't know that this was legally feasible.
It's big asterisk. So what we did is we argued that this barge is not a vessel, because there was actually a Supreme Court case that came out right before I started working on this that said, something that floats isn't automatically a vessel, and we use that logic to create this now patent pending setup where we're able to age the spirits. And so we took a couple experimental barrels and some traditional control barrels, compared them after about 6 months of the process, and after 6 months, even so, the kind of the difference, the spread in what the traditional rick house tasted like versus what the barge tasted like was quite dramatic, and convinced me to do this.
Wow, that's so cool. It's always like, like producing whiskey on its own has so many legal pitfalls, and there's so much red tape, and like you said, there's so many asterisks that I was like, wow, this is pretty ballsy to go ahead with like a very non-traditional frontier like you went for. How many barrels do you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have a single barge right now? How many barrels are you maturing, and are you planning to expand to like I guess the right word here would be a fleet, whether it's a vessel or not, but what's your
got it.
Like,
Go like 70 barges on the river.
So the current barge will hold about 2,000 barrels. Our next barge that we're already starting to have to plan, because we're going to be running out of space, is about 3,000 barrels, fixing a couple tolerances and this, that, and the other. I'll say just a quick anecdote. When I got started on this thing, it was quite comical. I didn't want to. We're trying something new here, right? I didn't want to just pile a bunch of money into my life savings into some crazy scheme. So I got what I thought would be the perfect bargain barrel loading equipment, and it was a pallet stacker that was foot operated from Granger Supply. So this thing shows up, and I'm like, I might need 2 of these because we're going to have a lot of barrels to load. So I ordered 2. I really splurged, and not expensive things, but they're foot operated, and they went up about 4 levels high. So our barge will hold 6 barrels high. The next one will hold 7. So you go in there and it's just It's 200 feet long. It's 35 feet wide. It holds a lot of stuff. Okay. So I'm in there and I get a bunch of my friends. They've been hearing me talk about this crazy thing for years. And I'm like, all right, come on, we're going to roll some barrels. And I said, roll barrels. I have the text. They said, roll barrels. They heard we're going to go taste my whiskey and this is going to be great. So they all show up, flip-flops, shorts, I'm like, no. We'll do that. But we got to put these 300 barrels. They need to go
get where they need to
go. They got to go up. And then we got more trucks coming. So it's like, let's get going. So these guys, we start putting these barrels on the stacker and start pressing the foot pump, and it goes up. It takes about 10 pumps to go an inch.
Oh man.
And yeah. and our first level isn't exactly right on the ground. It was about 6 inches. So, that's 60 pumps, I think. I don't know. I've won a few of these. So the second level, we were just, once we loaded up the entire first level because that was as much as they wanted to. And then the second level, because we ran out on the first level, and then half of them quit. They were done. They're like, no,
is out of here.
not worth it. So since then we've gotten the right equipment, but that was kind of a fun story. So right now we have about 1,200 barrels on this 2,000 capacity barge, and are looking to add another close to 700 this year, actually.
Wow, that's okay. I was going to ask, like how, like, barrels don't start at the sea. How do you get them on the boat? So you're palletized on the boat. Wow.
Well, no, actually, use a pallet stacker, but they're traditional. We roll them into the ricks. We clock the bung, all that fun stuff.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. If you go onto our YouTube page, we have a couple of videos, and one of them, we're a two-man shop, and my director of sales, and when he's not doing that, he's operations. He and I, we load every single barrel that's in this barge because, again, I'm, every dollar I don't spend on a bourbon barrel is one less I get to, bottle to sell. So that's kind of my philosophy. So he and I load all these barrels together, and he kind of walks through what is our rick house, what is our process, and we got some pretty cool drone footage.
Oh,
shows it.
Okay. Cool. I mean, yeah, drone footage seems really well placed. So if you guys are watching from home, go ahead and check out Ingram on YouTube. That's fascinating. So you guys have a bourbon and a rye. We're tasting the rye tonight. So are you guys planning, like, the bourbon? Is it out yet? Is that coming out soon? We'll talk about the rye here in a second, but what's your portfolio looking like? Like, are you aging on the same, kind of the sides of the boat? Or are you picking different ages? I'm kind of curious about how you decide what kind of goes where.
Yeah. So we have a straight whiskey that's out right now. And the rye that we're tasting tonight is our second release in the River Age series. We have a bourbon in the works that'll be out later this fall. I think we're targeting October or so, and that'll be a wheated mash bill, and it'll have been on the barge longer than anything else. So, if you like this, then great. All I can say is as our company gets older and as our process gets older, our barrels will just spend more and more time here on the barge, and so everything that we take now is it's new fill going in the barrel. Barrel comes to the barge, we put it on there, and we don't take it off until it's time to bottle.
Okay,
cool.
Wow.
So let's talk about, like, evaporation. I mean, being right on the water, obviously going to have a lot more humidity. Do you notice, you said initially you did some testing there between rickhouse aging and the boat. Did you notice a massive difference in evaporation and what was coming out of the barrel?
We are still studying that.
Okay.
My hypothesis is that there's three things about the process I think that are key here. And first and foremost, being on the barge, you get the motion of the water keeping the spirit churning inside the barrel, and that's causing the whiskey that's in the middle of the barrel, which traditionally is just sitting there, to make its way faster to the part that has the ability to impart flavor and allows it to pick up that flavor. So that's kind of the most obvious one. The second is the humidity. So being on the water, when it gets hot, you get a lot of humidity coming off the river. And in a traditional rick house, you have hot and dry, which is on kind of the top floors. And on the bottom, you have cool and moist because that moisture falls. Well, in the barge, we have to pull off the bottom level of vapors actually. So we have to kind of vent out the top, so we're constantly pulling in the air from outside. So we're getting that airflow, and so we're pulling in this humidity, this humid air from the river, and it's keeping, in my opinion, the barrels moist, allowing the sugar inside of it. You'll see it kind of makes this like stalactites. It's like this molasses that keeps dripping out. And so the sugar is staying, it's not drying out, it's staying moist, it's staying active. And I think our angel share will be less over time because these barrels are staying moist. They're not drying out. You're not kind of creating gaps that would be there for the vapors to escape traditionally. That's to be determined. Early indications are we might be headed in that direction. So we'll see. And we record all this data. It's all, we record all the data about not only the movement of the barge, temperature, humidity, all that's recorded. And one other thing that's kind of that third element about our process, we get a large diurnal shift, and I learned that word recently, and so it's become kind of one of my favorites. Diurnal. Bust that out at a dinner party, they'll be like, "Who the hell are you?"
Who's this guy?
And so that's your highs between your daytime and your nighttime. So you're kind of across the day. What's your extremes in temperature? And in the day, in the summertime, this barge is steel. It gets hot. It's got a fiberglass cover that sits on top of it, so it really holds that heat in. But at night, the river kind of pulls the heat off like a heat sink, and so we'll get 40-degree temperature swings in a day. That's really getting those pores big, soaking in that whiskey, and then kind of contracting back down and just kind of squeezing out that flavored goodness.
Wow.
Cool.
So these barrels are on the barge, 24/7, 365, right? Like we're deep in winter now. They're staying on the whole time.
Oh yeah, we don't take a blanket to them or anything. No, they're sitting out there. It's I'm actually heading up to do a little duck hunting tomorrow. We got some snow coming in, so it's kind of nice. Our duck camp's about 20 minutes away from the barge with the barrels on it, so I can go kind of hop over there after the hunt to make sure that they're still good. So now they're going to get some nice snow cover and
good.
But yeah.
Get a little quality control. And yeah, I'm here in Wisconsin. We got about 8 inches of snow last night. And that's something like, as I was shoveling my driveway today, I was like, I wonder if these barrels have to deal with snow like I do. That's really cool.
Not quite that level, but a little bit.
They handle it. So they get some pretty wild deviation, just like a barrel in Kentucky would, but with a little exposure. That's pretty cool. So let's see. I'm tasting the rye. John has the rye. I see that you have the rye there too. I think without going too deeply into it, like the barrel character here for 3 years seems like it's really, really well imparted. But it's pretty sweet for a rye, which I think is cool.
Yeah, it is pretty sweet.
I always wonder. So when I talk to people about other whiskeys that are near the ocean, everyone seems to think that it's salty, and I'm always like,
right.
Well, obviously this is on freshwater, so that's not the case, but. It seems to pick up a lot of that really nice like tannin structure for the age. Like, do you notice that like the maritime, other than maybe interchange with the wood, like does it pick up some maritime character? Are you expecting like things to kind of pick up like a river air over time, or do you think the barrel is pretty well keeping these insulated from kind of that environment?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. There's no playbook for what we're doing, so we're still kind of learning as we go with everything, which I think is so fun about it. I don't expect that there's not like a strong presence of any type of thing in the air that I think that we're going to pick up on. I just really think it's the interaction that you've noted between the whiskey and the wood occurring at a younger age for the whiskey. Scotch, a 12-year-old Scotch is like a 4-year-old bourbon, right? So I think what we're creating here is really a different set of conditions that the whiskey is able to mature in, and the the fun thing, in my opinion, would be if we're able to get some of that mature barrel notes, but still keep some of the sweetness of the grain that, maybe tends to go away as the whiskey gets older. And to your point about this being a sweeter on the rye, it is actually a low rye. It's actually 51% rye, 45% corn. So kudos on picking up kind of the softer notes there. But so in my palate, I like softer. I'm not really, pepper in the back of you. I do love a good hot chicken being down here in Nashville, but I don't like my whiskey to have those tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the sweetness is a great choice because like getting more of that interchange with the wood, like it's going to pick up that tannin, like which is kind of bold and peppery on its own, faster than a traditionally aged bourbon or rye. So I don't know how long you guys are planning, like, like if you're planning to let some of these get to like 6, 8, 10, 12 years, but like that's when things get really tannic. And I think having a sweeter mash bill really helps out there. Like, do you foresee letting some of these age for like a really long time, or do you guys have like a preferred age in mind where like, 6 years is the cap, everything at 6 years is going to get dumped? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think I have kind of an idea of where I want the brand to go with our different expressions, but I ultimately let the whiskey dictate. So, I want to have an 8 to 10 year expression down the road.
Okay.
Whether it's 8 years or 10 years, my sense is with the interaction between the whiskey and the barrel being the way it is, we're probably not going to have a 20-year-old a barrel. It's probably just, but if we can get those fun flavors in 10 and not have to wait 20 years, that's great for all of us, right?
Yeah, I mean, 20 years with like a lot of spirit wood interaction, I think would just kind of be bonkers in the wood direction. But there's a lot of really good flavor here, even for 3. Like, I'm amazed. Like, there's like a sweet kind of French toast note that I really like that I think is going to go really well with like thyme in the oak as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I love you say French toast because that's kind of the first thing I go to as well. And then I'm a dessert guy.
Okay.
Our straight whiskey, the white label, I always like to tell folks I think it's got like a creme brulee or a key lime pie on the nose. So,
Oh yeah, we like that.
Oh yeah, John.
Compared it to desserts.
John and I are big dessert fans, which is why we're both also trying to slim down a little bit. But
it does happen that way.
I mean, it's just too good. Like it's hard to pass up. But yeah, very desserty even at 3 years. I'm really curious what a couple more years on the river is going to do.
Hank, you mentioned something. You had a fiberglass cover going on, and we had a question come through the chat here. Are the barrels totally enclosed in the barge, or like what is the amount of exposure to the elements? Like, let's say it's dumping rain or the occasional snow, or like what's going on inside that barge?
Yeah, I laugh because the barge is not covered. Let me take it back. The barge has covers on it, but when we're putting the barrels inside of it, it may not always be covered. So I've absolutely been there in the middle of June in a downpour, and we're trying to get these barrels in as fast as we can. We have a container that we drop in that'll hold 56, and we're trying to unload this thing. We're just getting poured on. There's nowhere for this stuff to go. It's just we've got 2 or 3 inches of water in the entire barge, and here we are rolling barrels around. So they are exposed to the elements when we pop the top and start loading it up, but otherwise it's pretty watertight. So this barge actually was in a prior life, it used to move corn.
Okay.
And so it's still moving, or it's still holding corn. It's just
that's right,
slightly different state.
A little different. Right.
Awesome.
Corn.
So how much motion are the barges seeing? I mean, are they tied off, or do you have to move them around a lot?
Yeah, so no, we as part of that whole vessel versus floating facility thing, the barge actually does not move from the location. So the tax man wants his taxes, and so
tax men are want to do.
As they gotta. I don't know. They get commission off the taxes collected. It's not a bad gig if so.
How does this shit work?
So part of the reason why, originally you couldn't warehouse spirits on a vessel is because they wanted to make sure you weren't just sailing away with their tax revenue. So we have to stay in a designated area, and it is moored to the shore, and then as we add additional barges, we'll figure it out then.
Okay.
Might have to have some conversations with the powers that be, but no, it's not going anywhere. But quite frankly, with the movement of the river, 40, 45 feet of vertical fluctuation between your highs and your lows, not to mention I checked the page before I came on, and I think we're almost over 40 feet of movement in just the month of January, just vertically going up and down. So
that is, I expected a couple of feet, but 40 feet is just kind of blowing my mind. Like, that is a lot of deviation that I did not expect.
Yes.
Well, this time last year we were at
like crazy.
Yeah, we were at 45 feet on the gauge last year because we had a bunch of rain. If y'all remember, this year it's been pretty dry, so we're at it was 15.5 the other day when I was out there, and so it's amazing what the climate will do.
Wow, I mean, that is crazy. Like, this is really cool. My grandfather was in the Navy. I've been hearing boat stories all my life. I think it's super cool. But wow. 45 feet. I mean, that's taller. I think that's taller than my house.
The shit's moving, man.
Yeah, that is quite a bit of interaction. But I mean, clearly it's working though for a 3-year-old rye. Like, this has a lot of character, which I taste a lot of stuff young, putting down barrels, laying stuff barrels, and like, this has a lot of character for 3-year, which is super cool.
Thank you. It's working.
Yeah, I mean,
things are happening,
and like you say in words like 8-year and 10, you're like, I'm super excited to see how this ends up. Like, I think that's like this is, to put it in adult terms, like, this is like the world's biggest science experiment. Like, I'm here for it. I think that's really cool. I think of all the times I tell my fiance here in the house, like, I'm just going to try something quick. And she's like, don't hurt yourself. But like,
yeah,
that's like not even
think about it.
Yeah. That's not even close to scale. Like, let's throw, 1,000+ barrels on a barge and like, we'll see how it goes, which I think is really neat.
Well, when we build a barge, barges live for 35 years if you take good care of them. So, my dad always tells me, I'm not building these for me. I'm building them for you.
Wow.
Perfect.
Don't run the company down or whatever, because you're gonna have a bunch of barges you won't be able to do something with if there's nothing to put in there. But so they last a really long time. 20 years in a bourbon barrel, it's kind of like, oh, that's nice. It's kind of like the younger sibling of an older barge. Yes.
Wow. 35 years for a barge. Well, it has been a treat having you here tonight. Thank you again. Ingram sent us their rye whiskey to try. I'm looking forward to trying the bourbon as well at some point. So Hank, I know you guys are in a couple of markets. I hear some word on the street that you guys are expanding quickly. If our people listening at home, if they wanted to find you or Ingram whiskey, or potentially look at buying your bottles, where would they go about finding you online?
Well, we are all in the state of Tennessee. We are in the process of getting Memphis launched, and we're coming to Kentucky in the process of rolling that out online. We're working with some folks. Haven't got anything definitive yet, but I'm hoping to have an option there pretty soon. So otherwise, follow us at Ingram Whiskey on Facebook, Instagram, and then we're also on ingramwhiskey.com, where we're always updating our website as we think of new things that people might find interesting. So and there's always info at brownwaterspirits.com if you really want to get to me and say you're crazy, or like, hey, have you thought about this? We get them all.
It's cool. And you guys mentioned you have some statistics online as well, right? Like some information about the barge and the current conditions, I guess would be the word, like the conditions, like how things are going.
That's right. We're working on a webcam, but I gotta, that's technology, and we'll figure it out eventually.
I mean, it took John and I 1,000,000 years to get this stuff figured out, so I can't blame you.
And we work in tech, so. Cool. Well, I think the website's actually really cool. I was speaking at it earlier on in the stream. If you guys want to check that out, look at the Ingram Whiskey website. If you want to find me, I'm at thebourbonfighter.com. Jay is at whiskeyraiders.com. And Jay, I'll pass it off to you and we can close this thing right out.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Hank, thank you so much for your time. It was really cool. Like we hear a lot of similar stories, and I've never heard of someone putting whiskey on a barge. I think that's super interesting. So everybody, go ahead and check out Hank and his work. You can find Ingram whiskey at all the different sources they laid out. We're looking forward to seeing some of the other expressions. I'm Jay from Whiskey Raiders. If you're looking for the review, I will have the review of this rye whiskey up here probably in the next week or so, I think. And to everybody watching at home, thanks for joining us, and cheers. And thanks, Hank. We'll see you in the green room, my friend. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.